A pregnant woman found dead in her own bed, a pistol clenched in her hand, and 3 torn letters scattered on the floor. It looked like suicide until the lies began to unravel. On the night of March 13th, 1991, at Fort Lewis Military Base in Washington, an urgent call shattered the stillness. Military police rushed to a modest family home and stepped into a scene that would leave a lasting imprint on even the most seasoned investigators. Inside the master bedroom, the air was thick, heavy with the metallic stench of fresh blood. The only source of light was a dim bedside lamp, casting a sickly yellow glow over the carnage. Dorothy Davis, 35 years old and visibly pregnant, lay sprawled across the bed. Her body sagged against a blood-soaked pillow, her face turned slightly to the side with wide, unseeing eyes staring into the void. Her hand, unnaturally rigid, clutched a small pistol as if it had fused into her grip. Blood had sprayed across the white bedsheets and splattered against the nearby nightstand. 3 torn envelopes and the ragged edges of handwritten letters lay scattered across the carpet, like abandoned cries for help that had come too late. Among the debris, a prescription bottle of Prozac sat within arm's reach, positioned almost too perfectly. The initial observation seemed straightforward. A pregnant woman, suffering from depression, leaving behind apparent suicide notes, found dead from a gunshot wound to the head. Yet the scene felt wrong, its details unsettling even to the casual observer. Christian Davis, her husband, was the one who alerted the neighbors. According to his statement, he had returned home around 8:30 p.m., after working as a part-time DJ at the NCO club, and discovered his wife dead. Instead of using the home's working telephone, he had run next door to request help, an action that immediately raised silent questions among investigators. From a criminologist's perspective, several key inconsistencies emerged. Suicide, particularly among pregnant women, is statistically rare and often linked to overwhelming despair without hope for the future. Yet neighbors reported seeing Dorothy just hours before her death, cheerful, radiant, and discussing plans for her unborn child. Her demeanor contradicted the narrative of impending suicide. Moreover, the detail of the gun being tightly clenched in her hand contradicted established forensic patterns. In gunshot suicides, the physical trauma typically causes an immediate loss of muscle control, resulting in the weapon falling from the hand. The presence of the pistol in Dorothy's locked grip suggested external manipulation, not a natural death. Further suspicion arose from the placement of the Prozac bottle. Family members later confirmed that Dorothy had discontinued her antidepressant medication upon learning of her pregnancy. Its convenient positioning on the nightstand, rather than hidden away with other medicines in the bathroom cabinet, indicated a possible attempt to stage the scene to suggest a depressive episode leading to suicide. Each of these elements, the inexplicably clenched gun, the odd arrangement of evidence, the behavioral inconsistencies, began to weave a far darker possibility. The theory of suicide weakened with each new observation, replaced by a chilling hypothesis that Dorothy Davis had not taken her own life, but had been murdered, and her death made to look like an act of desperation. The question that followed was inevitable. If this was not a suicide, then who had orchestrated the grim tableau? Only one person stood to gain from Dorothy's death, her husband, Christian Davis. And if he was responsible, then the crime was not born of passion or rage, but of cold, deliberate calculation. In the dim silence of that blood-stained bedroom, surrounded by evidence both obvious and subtle, the truth waited, still breathing beneath the lies. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps us a lot. Thank you. In the weeks following Dorothy Davis's death, the house on Fort Lewis grew colder, emptier. Yet within that emptiness, Christian Davis wasted no time rebuilding the appearance of a normal life. Publicly, he presented himself as a grieving husband, overwhelmed by responsibility, struggling to raise 2 small daughters alone. Privately, he placed an advertisement for a live-in nanny. Dorothy Morris answered that call, moving into the Davis household with a speed and familiarity that few found appropriate. At first, her presence seemed to provide a sense of stability, but to those who looked closely, her relationship with Christian was anything but professional. Nearly a year after Dorothy's death, a witness named Audrey came forward with information that tore apart the fragile mask Christian had worn. Audrey revealed that on the night of Dorothy's death, Dorothy Morris had been present at the NCO club. More importantly, Dorothy had confided to her that Dorothy was dead before any emergency call had been placed, before any official notification could have possibly been made. The timeline, once assumed straightforward, now twisted into a shape far more sinister. If Dorothy knew of Dorothy's death before it was reported, it implied that she, and by extension Christian, had intimate knowledge of the events before the world did. Audrey's recollection grew more damning. She remembered Christian leaving the club under the pretense of making a phone call home, disappearing for 20 minutes. When she attempted to follow, she found no one at the payphones. When Christian returned, his demeanor had changed, and, more notably, he was no longer wearing the purple jacket he had arrived in. Later, when investigators reviewed crime scene photographs, they discovered a purple jacket hanging inside the master bedroom, a garment that did not belong to Dorothy. It was the same jacket Christian had been seen wearing earlier that evening, now left behind, soaked in the unspoken weight of its proximity to death. From a forensic standpoint, this detail was catastrophic for Christian's version of events. Clothing left at a crime scene is often one of the most damning pieces of circumstantial evidence, especially when tied directly to the timeline of the victim's death. The misplaced jacket placed Christian inside the house at the critical moment, despite his claims to the contrary. Slowly, the pieces fell into place. Christian's 20-minute absence from the club aligned perfectly with the estimated time of death. The premature knowledge displayed by Dorothy Morris implicated her as more than a passive bystander. Together, they appeared to have coordinated, not merely a crime, but the construction of a narrative, a story that painted Dorothy's death as an act of her own broken spirit, rather than the final act of someone else's cruelty. The more investigators peeled back the layers, the clearer Christian's true nature emerged. He was not a grieving husband, but a man methodically untethering himself from the bonds of marriage, fatherhood, and responsibility. Financial freedom beckoned in the form of Dorothy's life insurance policy, worth $150,000, and the opportunity to continue his affair without the burden of scandal or consequence. Christian Davis had not merely killed his wife. He had crafted a setting, planted evidence, manipulated timelines, and ensured witnesses would see only what he intended them to see. Yet for all his careful planning, it was the smallest miscalculations, the prematurely informed mistress, the discarded jacket, the staged medication, that exposed the monstrous truth. The stage was set for the final confrontation. But as investigators soon learned, the night Dorothy Davis died was not Christian's first attempt to erase the life that tethered him. As investigators dug deeper into Christian Davis's past, a chilling pattern began to emerge, one that suggested the death of Dorothy Davis had been years in the making. Buried beneath the surface of their marriage was a forgotten tragedy, a fire that had once reduced their first home to charred ruins. It had happened 4 years earlier, in 1987. At the time, Dorothy had been 6 months pregnant with their second child. In the dark hours before dawn, their mobile home had erupted in flames. Dorothy, startled awake by the heat and the acrid smell of smoke, stumbled through the blackness, calling out for her husband and their 2-year-old daughter. But Christian was already gone, having left minutes earlier with the child, claiming she had been restless and needed a drive to fall asleep. The fire had been ruled accidental, the probable cause an old television set. No one had questioned the convenience of Christian's timely absence. No one had asked why a father would remove only one child, leaving his pregnant wife behind to face the inferno alone. In hindsight, the fire no longer appeared as an unfortunate accident, but as the first failed attempt to sever the ties of marriage without the complications of divorce. It was not a singular act of recklessness, but the beginning of a pattern of cold, calculated elimination. Years later, that same detachment would resurface with deadlier precision. After Dorothy's death, the authorities re-examined every piece of evidence, every oversight. Special attention was given to the so-called suicide letters. Found near Dorothy's body, the letters had been hastily torn from their envelopes, suggesting a rush to display them to make their presence undeniable to first responders. Under forensic scrutiny, the edges of the envelopes revealed traces of saliva. DNA testing, in its infancy at the time but rapidly advancing, provided a damning answer. The genetic material did not belong to Dorothy Davis. It belonged to Christian Davis. The weight of the evidence collapsed any remaining doubt. Christian had prepared the scene, torn open the letters to appear as if they had been urgently read, and in doing so, left behind an irrefutable trace of himself at the heart of his wife's staged suicide. Christian Davis was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, not only for Dorothy's death but also with attempted murder for the earlier fire. His trial in early 1993 unfolded before a tense and silent courtroom. Prosecutors painted a picture of a man who viewed those around him not as family but as obstacles to be removed when inconvenient. They detailed his affair with Dorothy Morris, his financial motives, and the cold, methodical way he had orchestrated the illusion of despair. The jury took little time to return a unanimous verdict. Christian Davis was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. From a criminal psychology perspective, Christian Davis embodied the characteristics of an extreme narcissist, exhibiting a profound lack of empathy and an overwhelming sense of entitlement. His actions reflected a belief that he was justified in destroying the lives of others to preserve his own comfort and freedom. The meticulous staging of Dorothy's death, the previous attempt through arson, and the manipulation of evidence all pointed to a man who did not act in rage, but with deliberate, chilling calculation. The death of Dorothy Davis was not the product of a single tragic evening. It was the end result of years of resentment, deceit, and self-serving brutality, hidden beneath the ordinary facade of suburban life. Her story, once nearly lost in the quiet corners of a military base, became a testament to the perseverance of truth, and a grim reminder that evil often wears the mask of the familiar. Even now, behind the walls of his prison cell, Christian Davis continues to maintain his innocence. But outside those walls, the evidence he left behind speaks louder than any of his denials, whispering the story of a man who mistook love for ownership and family for chains he needed to break.